Okay, I'd like to bring Red Smith up here. Red's going to talk a little bit about CARB and some other things. Of course, I'm not really sure what he's going to talk about. I even had a microphone here ready for you, buddy. You got one back there?
Yeah, I got handed one.
Have a seat. We haven't been on the stage together for a long time, buddy. Huh? Red and I went and did a lot of town halls. We did two, and remember, we did the one in Roseville and in Lincoln. Yeah, we've done a lot of them. The best one we did was El Dorado when we hadn't slept.
Yeah, I think El Dorado was by far our best one. It was a lot of fun.
Anyway, buddy, can you tell us a little bit, just give us a little background on CARB for starters, or do you want to take this to another direction?
Well, I would like to ask everybody one question first. How many people here believe that what the enemy is doing, they only do it on Monday night while we're sitting here paying attention? We have to be paying attention and working at it every day. It's not a lot of fun. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of the pleasure out of the things that you'd rather be doing, but it has to be done. CARB, good example. We've gone through 2 evidentiary hearings with CARB now, and when we got into this thing, I think we were kind of thinking that we were going to push back on a regulatory agency that had gotten a little bit too big for its britches. Does that sound about right, Sally? Yeah. They are so much more than that. At the end of the day, these guys are a multinational, global criminal conglomerate. They are everywhere. And the things that they're doing, they've violated international treaty on some of the things. So I guess we'll just kind of back up and start from the beginning with CARB, where they first broke the rules. And they first break the rules by saying that they are not subject to coordination. Now, there are several criteria that an agency has to meet to be subject to coordination. And what coordination means is that the agency that is creating and enforcing the regulations will sit down with the local government and negotiate a way to come into compliance with those regulations that does not harm the local entity, whether that's the city or the county or whatever it happens to be that they're dealing with. It has to come into compliance with the local policy, not the local policy coming into compliance with the agency's regulations. So unless you can find a county who has a policy that we want to destroy our economy and put everybody on welfare, CARB is not following coordination. We've listened to testimony from different county supervisors, Del Norte, Modoc, Shasta County supervisors that have said they've never approached us for coordination as they're required to do. We've listened to several cities: Redding, Shasta Lake City, Anderson, Vacaville, Fairfield, Sassoon City, Dixon, Woodland. The list goes on and on. They have not coordinated. Now, CARB says that they don't have to coordinate because they are not a federal agency. Well, they are carrying out a major federal action because they are operating off of the Clean Air Act. That's one of the criteria that coordinates it. Another one that kicks off coordination is the fact that they're receiving federal funds. Now, the city of Redding, when they issued their letter to CARB and said, we're demanding coordination, CARB came back and said, we don't have to coordinate with you because we are not committing a major federal action. Now, about 3 weeks ago in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, CARB was being sued for violating interstate commerce law because they were creating a separate set of taxation and tariff for the state of California that didn't exist anywhere else. Now, that case was dismissed, but the case was dismissed because CARB said we are an entity of the EPA and we are committing a major federal action. So these guys are really playing hokey-pokey with this thing. They got, 1 minute we're this, 1 minute we're not. So these are the first very basic violations of law that we knew about before we started digging. Now we get digging into Freedom of Information Act and other things, trying to find out exactly what's going on with CARB, because our own Congress has subpoenaed CARB 7 times to get their hands on the scientific data that says diesel particulate matter is a cause of premature death. 7 times our own Congress has been denied by CARB. They won't cough up the information. Okay, now there's this little thing called the Data Quality Control Act. that states that any information to be deemed valid must be open, transparent, available, and easily reproducible by an independent third party. Okay, CARB has violated that because they will not disclose the science. Now it states right in the Data Quality Control Act, any data that does not meet that criteria is to be deemed fraudulent. So everything CARB is basing what they're doing is federally deemed fraudulent. Not only that, they have gone before Congress and procured federal funds with fraudulent data. That's chargeable with up to 10 years in a federal prison. It gets better. So we're still at the tip of the iceberg, and we're discovering these things as we go through all of this. Okay. Now through this Freedom of Information Act, some guys back east discovered that CARB has been doing human testing on people. At the same time that they are testifying before Congress that there is zero safe level of exposure for diesel particulates, that it is absolutely 100% the cause of premature death, these guys are exposing children as young as the age of 10 to 60 times normal the amount of exposure. They're taking kids and sitting them down in universities and running hoses into their nose and directly pumping in so that they can ingest diesel particulate matter. That's 60 times normal. They're taking groups of asthmatics, putting them on exercise equipment, and then pumping diesel exhaust fumes into the room to see if they can cause a reaction. Because they know their science doesn't hold up. They took one gal at the University of North Carolina that they knew had a heart defibrillator or a heart defibrillation, and tested her and ran her through the whole sequence, went back and tested her, said, oh, look, she's still got a heart palpitation. Guess what? That's caused by diesel particulate matter. Now, the problem with this is at the end of World War II, about 1945, when the truth started to come out about the Nazis and the medical tests that they had done and the different things that they had done, the world got together and said, never again. This shall never happen again. And they established what was known as the Nuremberg Code. Well, the California Air Resources Board and 10 universities in the United States of America and 6 universities abroad, and the EPA funding them with your money, has violated that. Because one of the things that the Nuremberg Code, which is also known as the general rule in California because they've adopted it for medical testing, is that if there is any level of danger that any form of testing will cause, you don't do it. You're not even allowed legally to ask, especially when it comes to children. And then we get looking into what's the word I'm looking for, when they tell you what you're doing to you in your test, the disclosure.
Oh, disclosure.
Yeah. So we get looking at the disclosure. Yeah. There is the consent forms, thank you. At the consent forms, there is no mention of long-term harm. There's no words like cancer. There's no words like asthma, small diesel particulate matter, acute cause of death, you know, cancer causing, none of that. They didn't even disclose to these people what they were doing to them. So CARB is in this unique conundrum of, okay, is your science complete BS and you conducted these tests because you knew you weren't going to hurt anybody and you've been lying the whole time, or are you psychotic Nazis that are trying to kill people to prove your science? Well, okay, here's the thing, and we get it. So now we know that they violated international health law, okay? And then we're listening to more testimony and we get into this, and then we find out exactly how much diesel particulate matter that we're talking about, okay? We're talking about 0.25 microns per million liter part. Okay, now what that means is if you take all of that diesel particulate matter and add it up, all your normal amount of exposure over an 80-year lifespan, you would be absorbing 0.004% of a teaspoon. That's the equivalent of smoking 5 cigarettes over 80 years of life. That's what all these regulations are based on. That kills you.
Do you think that they're using environmental regulation for extortion?
They absolutely are. Because look at what they have done with this science, with this faulty science and these lies, these outright lies. The amount of money that has gone into the filtration systems for the trucks. And one that we're working on now is one of the very early filter companies that was making trucks for these filters. Just so happens the California State Assemblywoman that helped push AB 32, her husband owned the company that made the filters, but the filters have now been found faulty, so the company's closed shop and gone away, so you can't do anything about it.
Isn't that the reason Highway Patrol's so upset because they're not DOT?
Well, the Highway Patrol is. We actually heard testimony from a former Highway Patrol officer. None of these filters have been safety inspected. They are not DOT approved. He testified that they could be causing up to 5 fires a week on trucks and buses. So again, CARB has violated the law for health and public safety because they have not tested these things that they're mandating. They are exposing school children to possibly burning up with these things. And the list goes on and on and on. And then you get into the fact that they have no regulatory or police authority to carry out any of these actions. And then we hear a story of a guy that pulls into a scale and CARB goes to inspect his truck. And he tells CARB, you can't inspect my truck. You have no authority to do this. So CARB gets the CHP to crack open the hood, and the CHP starts conducting their test, and the CARB guy goes ahead and hops up on there and starts writing this guy tickets. So the guy says, show me the law, show me the regulation, show me anything that I have violated and where you have authority to charge me anything. CARB guy can't do it, so this guy figures it's going away. Well, CARB gets a hold of him and says, you owe us this money for the fines, pay us now or we're going to make these retroactive back to January 1st. Guy says, you don't have any authority to charge me for this. They put a tax lien on his property.
You see, I think we've gotten to a point where they will do what they want to do because we let them. So at what point do we say, okay, we want to play by the rules, which we are, and we want to obey the law, and we do, but at what point do we say, but we're not going to let you have 5 aces and take the pot, because there has to be some sort of consequences to you not following the law. And I think that's the thing here. Now, it seems to me that we have so many things that happen. Is there, Red, do you think that there's maybe I like to call it trickle-down tyranny? Do you think that
absolutely?
Do you think that there's anything happening that trickles down to a little closer to, say, River City?
Yeah, give me a little bit, and I'm going to bring this right home. Okay, so now we've got all of these different things going on, and how many people are familiar with cap and trade? Okay, I'll be real quick then, make sure everybody understands it. They've decided that fuel producers and fuel refineries create too much carbon. They have to mitigate that by buying clean air. Nobody has explained to me how buying clean air in somewhere like Quebec stops pollution in the Central Valley. That's a whole nother discussion. So we've got cap and trade going on. It's raising the prices of our gasoline about 81 cents a gallon right now. Okay. Now, how you buy carbon credits is there is an open world market for carbon credits. You log on to this one company's website and you bid on carbon credits for clean air in places like Quebec under the Montreal Protocol that happened to be set up by these guys called the World Bank. You go to places like the Nepal Water Project and buy the carbon credit that's generated by the Nepal Water Project that happens to be headed up by McConnell Foundation out of Redding, California.
Wow.
You go to Nepal.
Can you say that again?
Well, McConnell is one of the largest carbon credit sellers in Shasta County.
No.
They are. And it's on a water project that they're doing in Nepal, or in Kenya. They have another one in Nepal. So you have all of this huge auction that's going on for all of these carbon credits where you can buy clean air. But in places like Lake County that is considered the second cleanest air in the country, you can't generate any carbon credits out of Lake County that has clean air because their population's considered unhealthy. And their population is considered unhealthy because there's too many people in poverty because regulations like CARB put them all out of work. Okay, so who is running this auction? It's a private company called the World Climate Initiative Incorporated. Now, who owns World Climate Initiative? CARB. Can anybody tell me how a public agency incorporates, owns, maintains, and runs a private company?
Out of Delaware, isn't it?
It is out of Delaware. They actually have an office right down here in Sacramento. I've called about 20 times now trying to get somebody to answer the phone or call me back, and they won't do it. But if there is anybody out there that can explain to me how a public agency can do that, I would love to know, because I'm baffled. Either. It works for me either way at this point. So we know that they've generated, by their own numbers, $1.5 billion on these carbon credits. Okay, it's a public agency that owns a private company, has generated $1.5 billion. We know 25% of that is being funneled back to California for the high-speed rail. 25% of that is going to environmental justice, which means they're funding environmental companies to sue and settle everywhere that they go so that they can generate more funds. And 50% of this money's missing. We can't account for it. We can't find any record of it. We don't know anything that's going on with it.
Check the pockets of your politicians.
Well, how many people know who Mary Nichols is? Okay, Mary Nichols is the head of the California Air Resource Board. She is also the treasurer of this private company.
Sorry.
Also on the board of directors is a gal named Toni Atkinson, who is the majority leader of the House Assembly in Delaware. Okay? Her wife is one April Lashir, who was one of the Bank of America people who got tagged for the mortgage fraud bundling. That's who's running this private company that's sucking us dry. Okay? So now we get into all these little tendrils of what's going on with this environmental movement that is sucking us dry, and we start looking at things like mitigation banks. How many people know what a mitigation bank is? Okay, say you want to build a parking lot in Shasta County. Okay? Anything. You want to build an outhouse in Shasta County. Okay, the building department's going to show up, and they're going to show up and they're going to do an environmental impact study. Oh, guess what? Where your outhouse is going just happens to be a hole in the ground where we think Vail fairy shrimp used to breed. You have to mitigate that. Now, how many people know how you mitigate the environmental impact of your outhouse? Okay, that's right. You go and buy a mitigation credit, which is similar to a carbon credit. Okay, so you actually have to pay somebody that already has this land, that is already doing nothing with this land, to continue to do nothing with this land and give them money to mitigate your impact. Even though when you started, you had your hole that your outhouse is going on, and he had his land over here, and you're still losing this hole, and you still have this land no matter what, you still have to pay this guy to mitigate it. Now, who knows the one place in Shasta-Tehama County in the North State area where you can mitigate that environmental impact? Not McConnell. Glenn Hawes, former Board of Supervisor, Glenn Hawes. Okay, now we've been tracking the money on this, and I've got the money up through 2008, and then all of a sudden it just stops. There's been sales, I've found records of sales, but I can't find an amount after that, and I'm after Fish and Game because, yet again, Fish and Game, a public agency, is the oversight holder of this private corporation that's owned by Glenn Hawes, was set up by Fish and Game. Now, under their own laws, they have to disclose quarterly, 4 times a year, the amount of money that that bank has taken in, where it's gone, what it's doing. So we're finding tiny extensions of this, and we're trying to make the connections, and then we find out that this mitigation bank, and they are all over California, is tied in with specific partners in species banking. Okay? Now, species banking have partners like the United Nations Development Program. That's Glenn Hawes. And the Stillwater Plains Mitigation Bank. That's the United Nations sitting right out there. People like the Wildlands Fund, they're in on it. Bloomberg, Michael Bloomberg out of New York. They're one of the direct associates of the Stillwater Mitigation Bank. Okay, these are the things that are going on. So now we're starting to see the tie of all these tendrils of this mass green movement that's going on. And what's really going on is because you have these different layers of people. You have your average kind of low information citizen that hears talking points like, oh, save the planet, clean air, clean water. You know, you're saving this for your children. When Cap and Trade came out, I actually watched one news bit. And the gal at the gas pump sitting there pumping gas, and the reporter says, well, you know that this is making your gas go up. And she goes, well, I'm really saving the planet for my kids, so it charging me a couple extra cents at the gas pump really isn't that big a deal. And you have that group of people that think that way. At the next tier, you have your government workers, which are pretty much what's left of the middle class in America, and they're there 9 to 5. They keep their head down. They do what they're told. They collect their check. They go home. They hope their retirement's there. Little do they know that CalPERS and CalSTRS is now being taken over by the United Nations to fund the green movement. So you have that class of people. Then you have people that exist a little bit closer to home that have figured out the scam of the green movement and how to make money off of it. These guys know this science BS. They know what's going on is wrong, but they're making money over it, hand over fist. Say, use this as an example, is you have a buddy that you grew up with and we're in politics with in the same county and used to sit on the board of supervisors, and your buddy now has a mitigation bank that collects all of this money, that then funnels it to a nonprofit, that then funnels it into your campaign contributions. And when somebody doesn't pay their mitigation fees or stands up, you as a board of supervisors sick the county planning department on them to make sure that they pay their fee to your buddy that owns the mitigation bank so he can funnel that money back into your campaign coffers.
Now, my question is, how do we bring those people to the table? And do we not say anything? What Red just said just now, do you guys all believe that was fairly civil? Is that pretty civil? Considering the information? And since it was civil, do you think that if somebody that has a dog in the hunt, do you think that they would be amiable to Red or amiable to this information? You see, we have to grow up a little bit and understand this is real. And understand that there are people out there, yes, there's a lot of people out there that are uninformed, and a lot of people that Red can educate, and folks like Red that get this information and educate us like they have been. And there is folks out there like that, but there's folks out there that don't care, because what we have found in going to not all the board of supervisors, we found some great boards of supervisors and some great people. Glenn County's they were amazing. But we've also found that they ask one question, and that question is, how does this help me, or how does this hurt me? Not how does this help my constituents, or how does this hurt my constituents? And I think that the information we have here, and I believe this is probably just the tip of the iceberg you're giving us, huh?
Yeah, we're really just going to get into it little bit by little bit and lay it out there so that people have a firm foundation of what's going on, and how not only the global model of what's going on, but how that has trickled down tyranny even to the form of our local government. Because ask yourself a question: if you're a sitting board of supervisor member in Shasta County and huge amounts of your campaign funds are coming from a place that makes its money off of California's environmental regulations, why would you ever even want to listen to a movement that wants to change the dynamic?
You see that, and the other thing is too, is that, you know, we have some things now, some tools we didn't have in 2009, and you know, we have some tools. One of those things is the Shasta Lantern. We gave out, what, 1,500 at the gun show. You know, it's an excellent paper. In fact, it's thicker than the Record Searchlight. The Record Searchlight on Monday now is like a good cigar, but you know, wrapped in plastic. But, you know, when you look at that, we have Sovereign. How many of you folks listen to Sovereign Minds? I mean, if you're not listening to Sovereign Minds, I'm telling you. I mean, you know, Mark and Linda they have done a great job, or should I say Linda and Mark, No, they've been great. You were great with George Runner. But they have great programming. What the thing is that what I like about that program is they bring things here to me. I mean, I can't do anything about the wolf. I can't do anything about a lot of things that are going on. There's so many. I can't do anything about a myriad of issues that get thrown at us. But the one thing I like about Sovereign Minds is that it's bringing to light and bringing all this good information about things that affect us, and gives us something and a way to do something about these things. And that's really getting the word out. And I thank Mark and Linda for being so honest. Like Mark said before, there comes a time. He's talked to me before. I'm going to tell on you. He said, I think maybe I just need to tone it down a little. No. As long as you're respectful and where that goes. But I mean, if a guy lies, he lies. I'm tired of talking about them being and saying the untruth. I mean, it truly is what it is. Now,
can I?
Yes.
And maybe somebody else can help me with my understanding here. Is when one of our elected officials does something bad, we don't want to say anything about it or be too loud about it because we're worried that may cause them to do something bad. I mean, is that the logic behind it? Because that doesn't compute with me, is we can't call them for what they are because they might continue to act like what they are.
Yeah, Shay.
I have kind of an example that would probably help people understand what is going on. In this shop, we have a lead compliance. Back in the 90s, a lot of the vehicles, all the orange trucks were painted with a lead-based paint or primer, and that becomes a problem when you go to grind into weld and all that kind of stuff on it. So part of that compliance that we have to do is you can't have any open containers or anything like that in the shop because those little particles might get into it and contaminate it. But about 25 feet from my toolbox, there's a drinking fountain that doesn't have any cap on it. And you can go right over there and get something to drink. So the guys in the shop and I have gotten hassled over having a soda or a water or something in the shop. And you can't go to our supervisor and tell him, look, you dipshit, we have a drinking fountain right there, and you're yelling on us for having a water. Because not only will he say, well, it's the policy of not having that stuff in there, but then he'll turn around and take the drinking fountain out, and we'll be left with nothing.
Turn it out into ocean.
And I wanted to get back to one thing before we get too far down the rabbit trail. As I said, there's 4 types of people. Now, we just discussed the 3rd type of people that know what's going on, but they don't care because they're making hand over fist. And then there is the 4th kind of person. And there is no negotiating, there is no cooperating, there is no sitting down and making these people see reason. They are the true believers. They are the people that believe that the world population should exist at 500 million people, 500 million. That we should live in teepees. That we are destroying the planet, and for our own good, they must get rid of all of us. There are people like that out there. Mary Nichols of CARB is one of them. She is one of the head druids of the dirt-worshipping earth muffins. And these people are the enemy, and they are absolutely willing to crush us, drive us out, and kill us because they believe they are saving the planet. And there is no negotiation with those people.
You're the first.
And that's pretty much it for now.
Thank you, Red Smith. Anyway, yeah, we're going to have a breakout tonight on